I appreciate you joining us for a very special Wednesday edition of Talent Grind Live. And so, generally, I think we want to be talking about the LinkedIn AI report. However, Alex called an
Call.
audible and sent a copy to an article from the BBC that says half of all knowledge workers are using personal AI tools. So I
I thought,
think,
yeah,
yeah,
just
I
like
think generally we just want to talk about the LinkedIn report and how AI is intersecting the recruiting marketplace and generally knowledge workers in general.
yeah. Let's dive right into the LinkedIn report. I think because I think there is a lot of data there that is actually quite fascinating. I think that I think like for an audience that would be listening to this, I would genuinely take away. Oh, okay. If I'm not doing AI, I'm not alone, and B, there's so much more for me to do. There's a lot of work to do, but there's just an absolute ton of upside. I'm just going to throw a piece of data in here, Michael,
Yep.
that I thought was really cool from that LinkedIn. I'm going to put it in the notes afterwards of whichever. But it's talent acquisition professionals using generative AI reported 20% reduction in workload on average. And let's just leave that hang for a second. For those that are using AI, clearly they're like, it's such a time saver. For those that are not, imagine getting a one whole day a week back just from implementing AI tools.
This has always been the way with technology. Very early on, I started using a scheduler way before Calendly became a thing. I found people receptive to using it, and it brought 40% of this back and forth time that I'd spent. When are you available? What about this day? What about this day? Sometimes it would be 6 to 8 emails just to get one calendar set, whereas I could send a link and it would be done in a second. And so I think it's iterating upon that progress we're seeing with
Yeah.
technology. But now the thing I think people need to understand about AI is comparison to other technology, where in the past you had to figure out the settings, you had to figure out the best way of using it. AI has never been easy. You can actually just go to an AI and say, teach me how I can be really good at using you, and it will teach you.
Yeah, that's literally, I use it that way for prompts. It's like, help me write a better prompt for what I'm trying to do and what I need. ChatGPT is such a gateway. When we think about AI tools, automation, workflows, all the kind of things, my barrier or like my sort of bar for having a conversation with people about AI is what's your familiarity with even using ChatGPT? Because if you're more than novice at it, conceptually, I think the rest of AI will start making sense to you because you'll start thinking, where can I plug this in? Where can I figure out where this kind of sits in my own workflow that I can find these sort of optimizations to get that 20% reduction in workload, you know?
Yeah, from that report, it said AI is transforming recruiting by automating routine tasks. 70% of TA pros agree. And for me, that's not a bad thing, right? And so ultimately, the system I'm trying to build is right now, I feel like we live in a world where information workers are spending 80% of their time sourcing talent or prospecting clients, verifying email addresses if you're good. And you care about your company's bounce rate, crafting personalized message, and we spend 20% of our times actually having meetings with people, maybe more if you're really good. I think it should be inverse. We should be spending 80 to 90% of our time building relationships and only 10 to 20% of our time actually doing that nitty gritty work. And I think that's where AI is going to take us.
Oh man, I'm so glad you said that because I think that's the thing that I think has people worried when it comes to something like AI,
Yeah.
where I use this example a lot, obviously, but I was on a sales call before where somebody said to me, we have an intake of new recruiters coming and we want them to quote unquote work.
Yeah.
And if for those listening, Ellie sells a note taking and summarizer for recruiters. So we would cover the note taking part. And obviously, if taking notes takes 15 to 20 minutes after a call to get them locked down, you get them back in 60 seconds. Obviously, you're getting an enormous amount of time back. But there are people that when they don't have like their AI sort of head turned on or they haven't seen the upside of what AI can do, like of course you're going to be like, oh, this is the exact job spec that exists today, which has always existed, but things change. And that smuggling AI article, which we'll also speak about, I was so happy I read that because I was like, that has to be true.
It
There's no,
does.
because I sit on calls all the time with people, and I have no doubt in my mind that their younger employees are using ChatGPT to write job descriptions, to write debriefs, bringing like Fireflies or an Otter or any of these sort of like typical free AI recorders, bring them on calls. Like, why wouldn't you? As in, what's the downside? If anything, it's giving them an edge today. And I'm here for people to do that. I just think that companies should be more open-minded about it because ultimately these trends aren't going to go away. Reminds me of setting up a Facebook page in 2009 for your business where people thought that was juvenile, and obviously that Facebook has become the biggest advertiser in the world now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been thinking about that statement because about the client saying we want people to work. I've got a response for you.
Oh, go for
It's,
it.
oh, do you want them to work in a pre-AI world or a post-AI world? And which world do you think is going to win? You can't have them work into a pre-AI world standard anymore.
Totally. But surely if you were a recruiter now I think everybody should ask about AI process protocol in every interview, no matter what, to get a feel for what
Yeah,
that business is like. Because obviously, if like we don't have any AI in this business, you'd be like, yeah, maybe that's not really the company for me. So you might as well try and have control over it. And I always like to describe this. We're talking about a sliver of your entire workflow. When we talk about something like AI call recording, you think about the sourcing, the vetting, the scheduling, the interviewing,
the
the uh,
assessment, the debrief, everything. Yeah.
yeah, the whole life cycle of
It's a
this. Like
sliver. It's a sliver of the ecosystem of what's needed.
sliver. And I'm like, fix your sliver. Isn't that what they say? Isn't that like the football coach mantra, marginal gains?
Yeah.
Where can you get like an efficiency gain somewhere? What's a quick win? If you think about sourcing, which is probably the hardest part of your job, which is sourcing good quality candidates,
Yep.
that there is an area to really think about when it comes to like sort of an AI strategy. Because it's really, I think, and as the non-recruiter, so I'm curious your take on this. If I was to think about sourcing, okay, I think of it like with my sales hat on, that kind of thing. I need to find the right customers. So there's obviously databases. In your case, it's databases like LinkedIn. But if you think about it, that's really the platform. But what is the AI? What's the role of AI in that section? It's not really the communication per se. It's like the process of communication. How ingesting sort of like applications. What are you going to do to triage those applications? If you put a job up, Mike, surely if you post a job on LinkedIn, everyone's complaining that they're getting 1,000 applications and how they expected to even read those in the first place. So there's probably like areas within sourcing, I imagine, that are like, okay, we need to not slap a band-aid on it, but rethink from the ground up how AI can help you with, say, your sourcing, your vetting in that little section of your
It's
life
not
cycle.
about sourcing and yeah, it's about why you're doing it, I think.
Say more.
So we got access to OpenAI in 2022 and we started using it in a sandbox. We built in some type of Google sandbox. We built some Python scripts. We started using, I guess, GPT 2.0, I think, for personalization for recruiting outreach. And we saw pretty quickly that the minute that they released Chat GPT, like publicly, like they did, everybody would just be racing to incorporate it into their products. So we start thinking about it just a little bit differently in terms of, I think we're living in a structure right now where everybody's scrambling to build relationships, but do they really? I see a new structure emerging, which is what my services company provides with our platform. We do all of our outreach as our clients and their executives, right? So we're building their relationship with the talent pool. And I can see a new model where a senior recruiter is supporting an executive or an organization. They're doing all their outreach as the managers and executives in that organization, right? And then when the positive responses filter through, they hand back to themselves like we do today. And then they build a relationship with the candidate, bringing them into the recruiting process and then bringing them up if they meet the standards that are needed. And so I think what you're going to see is you're going to have early level people who are doing all the core sourcing, doing outreach as the executives. The people who will be building the relationships will be the executives and the recruiters, not necessarily the core people until they move up into the recruiter role and then have people supporting them. Right? Because right now you got to have a bunch of like early level recruiters or you have sourcers who are reaching out as themselves. Why? It doesn't add anything. It doesn't help get a signal through the noise. People don't want to hear from some low level person. They want to hear from the executive or the hiring manager that they're going to, I know this for a fact. We've been doing this for 5 years. They want to hear from the person that they're going to report to. Right. And if you do outreach as the person they're going to report to, even when they turn your business off, if you did all that outreach through their
Yeah.
domain, you have all those emails out in the world. And then 6, 9, 12 months down the road, there's a layoff, a new boss comes in, something happens, they didn't get the promotion, people just start looking. They will always go for the low hanging fruit. Who's been trying to recruit me? Oh, well, this VP of engineering at Twitch sent me an email, which was really just sent by a team supporting them. I respond back to that VP, opportunistic hire. I was interested in her 6 months ago. I probably have demand on my team still, right? Like I could bring one more engineer in. So this to me is the new model of corporate recruiting that we should be aspiring to. And then you still have the early level people who see the guts of the machine and how
Yeah.
it works and how the quality of your input results in the quantity of the output that you have coming back to you.
Which
Right.
is interesting because what you're saying there just sounds to me like really good inbox management. You know?
It's just a whole philosophy about
Yeah.
it's a whole philosophy about how you source and reach out to people. Right. Because I was at a client and they took my methods and they sent them to the Philippines and they spammed and sprayed everybody in Silicon Valley. And they went from being from like this really hot startup that was kind of a who's who to just, oh yeah, those guys emailed me. And I realized from watching them do that, it's all about the quality. So if you put a high quality of input in, then if you source 100 people, but they're all on target and you get like a 3 to 5% response rate, that's enough candidates to fill a pipeline, right?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I guess
So
you know better than I. If you're hiring for an executive for a startup, let's say it's a $10 million Series A funded startup. If you're looking for, say, a chief revenue officer, chief head of sales, if you're looking for something like that, like how many people do you think you need in that pipeline? Do you need 20 people to be interviewed?
it depends on the quality of the applicants. So you always want to have
Well, yeah,
good applicant quality. You want to have good source quality, and you want to have good referrals from the board, from other executives.
yeah,
So that's kind of a trilogy that any good kind of talent should be looking for. And so obviously you're filtering all the applicants, you're picking the gems out of it, right? The slush pile. But when it comes to sourcing, you want to make sure that every single person you reach out to is right where you're looking for someone to come into the organization.
well,
You know
that
what I
is
mean?
key. And I mean,
But
like,
that's
that's the game
really
of
it.
darts. Yeah,
It's garbage in, garbage out, right? I've had people tell me my entire life, well, you can have quality or you can have quantity, but you can't have both. When I was at Bolt, I delivered quality and quantity, right? Because it's the growth techniques that you use, it's the software that you use, it's the methods that you use, and then making sure then that you've got multiple checkpoints doing quality at the top of the funnel so that no matter who responds back to you, they are on target and you can do something with them. And it's
yeah.
really not that difficult. It's
No,
not
no,
that
no, no, no.
difficult.
It takes time to do that homework, to do that research. The
Yeah.
question is, if recruiters are listening to this pod, which I hope, but they're listening to
Yeah.
this live, okay? What are they supposed to take away from that? They're like, do I just rip up everything I need to do today? How do I keep my head afloat, given that there's such a systemic do more with less vibe running across
Well, first of all,
talent
my
acquisition
platform's
today?
free. So you can go to teamsource.com. It's still in beta. It's still a little bit rough, but like Reid Hoffman said, if you're not a little bit embarrassed by your first product, you waited too long to ship it. So I would say to people, go check out TeamSource and contact me if you want me to walk you through it. And I could show you how you can do all of your outreach as your hiring managers. You can have your company put an alias onto your work email. You can come in, authenticate with our platform, and then you can start sending emails out as that alias, and the responses come right back into your inbox. It's
Yeah,
brilliant.
that's what I do with sales.
Yeah, it's brilliant, right? Because it's those people don't have the time to do the outreach, but they don't mind generally if you're doing the outreach as them. I recommend that you put all your messaging down in a Google Doc and share it with them and get buy-in all the way through the process. Even like the first 2 or 3 rounds of candidates that you reach out to, have the hiring manager review and give you feedback. That's what we do with our services business. But then after that, we've got a beat on what you're looking for, and then we're just handling the top of the funnel for you. Or if you can hire someone globally for $8 to $12 an hour to do all the sourcing work for you, then you can just review and engage and then
Yeah.
the inbox. So this is still a manual process, right? All of this is going to be outsourced to AI within the next year or two.
Which is what's interesting because I was just going to say, we haven't really mentioned AI in this sort of process. So I think it's important to recognize that for people as well. It isn't a question of just slapping on AI.
So we want to use AI for laser eyes. Some little indicator in the Chrome extension, something that's looking at the intake so that you don't have to have the intake open and it's saying, yeah, this person's a fit, make green, yellow, red, right? So you can just source more quickly. and review processes, or having the AI go out through your database, find people that you've talked to previously and bring them up front and ask if you want to engage them for this particular role. So I think that's the systems that are going to start to be built. But going into this article you said from the BBC, 50% of knowledge workers using personal AI tools. This is right in line with why I built my system the way I did, because there's a shadow IT economy, right? And it's
Yes.
happened ever since the iPhone came out. And people are bringing their own equipment to work because they want to be more successful, right? They want to get an edge over the people they're working with. They want to move up in their career. They want to be more efficient. I was one of the first 20 to use HireTool, which became Hire Easy. And I started sourcing rings around every other recruiter job box.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. This has been going on for a long time.
Sure. It's
It's
just
just
going to
like,
get worse from here.
well, I don't know if it's gonna get worse. I just
So
think it's gonna be like
worse
more
for all
normal.
these companies building enterprise software, I should say. Better for the end user.
Yeah, better for the recruiter. If you think about it,
Yeah.
this is what I'm saying. Anybody that is using an AI tool will give you an edge, especially if your company's not going to roll out a solution for it. There are obviously data security risks. Like one of the things in recruiting that I always find so fascinating is the amount of recruiters I come across that will upload stuff into ChatGPT, like sensitive transcript information. And I'm like, that's technically not a secure place to put your information, and they train the model on the information that comes in when you could be having a high level conversation with somebody, people just downloading a Zoom transcript or something. I find that very fascinating. But if you get past it, like you talk about, say, your email aliases and AI automation and stuff like that. My God, I think about this all the time. I have a system that will ingest a lead that comes into the website. It will then basically run through a different table on a tool I call Clay. And it will basically say, is this person a recruiter? Yes, no. Are they a recruiter? Okay, great. Then pipe them into this little campaign over here. Okay, this is on their LinkedIn. This is on their Twitter. This is latest press releases about this person in the last 12 months. Do we want to acknowledge it? Are they regular posters on LinkedIn? If they are regular posters, then acknowledge the little post and away you go. And then you'll get a message from me that's timely, but also there's research done there. You know what I mean? And look, whether or not one feels like, oh, that's so impersonal that you didn't actually send me that email. I'm like, no, but I built a system so that I can react to your interest.
I
No
don't know if
one,
it's impersonal as much as it's
yeah,
enabling to me.
is
I
which
think
to
the
you?
point should be to enable 100 to 1,000 times the opportunity that people have today.
Thank you. Yes. If somebody is displaying intent or interest, don't you want to be able to capture that and offer value back to them? It's the same for sales as it is for recruiting.
Yeah.
If somebody comes to a job page, if somebody goes onto your greenhouse page on your website, they're not there for shits and giggles. Somebody's there because they're interested, they're doing research. So
Yeah.
they're either in the middle of the funnel or they're at the very bottom. I need a job right now, or I'm currently looking, I'm interested in opportunities. They're
Right.
the two kinds of people that you're communicating with. So how do you build a system to respond to one of those two choices?
Yeah, it's that sales system would be remarkable for recruiting as well.
Uh,
Usually sales is the tip of the spear, right? Because sales is much more difficult than recruiting. Is a lot more difficult than recruiting, and I was a recruiter
um,
for over 25 years, and I've tried to do sales, and sales is really difficult. It's really difficult to distinguish it yourself, to differentiate yourself.
I would agree with you, but I think you want to put the marketing kind of diktat. Let's put the right message in front of the right person at the right time. And it's been very hard to do that for years, especially with digital, where it's impossible to know what device somebody's on or where what really anything about them. So being able to be smarter with your data, to be able to unmask people, to be able to put the right message in front of the right person at the right time. I'm all here for it. And when I think about your gig as a recruiter, yeah, AI will be able to unlock a lot of these kinds of automations that you otherwise would have to do manually and really struggle with. Do you know what I mean? And it's that for me, I think is a big crest of the wave that just the industry as a whole is finding itself in right now. I always laugh. I have people reach out to me that just type in AI plus recruiting.
Mm.
They don't really know what they're looking for. They just know because they went to a conference. Because there's a lot of people that just don't know much about AI beyond ChatGPT. And AI
It's
isn't
because it's
some
so
like,
early. It's gonna be built
yeah,
in. It's gonna be built into
but
tools, right?
I
Yeah.
think that's an opportunity for recruiters as well.
Gary Vee
Like
would say that this is an arbitrage opportunity, right?
1,000%. If we go back to that point, there's 20% reduction in workload on average. That's an entire day
Yeah, how
for
can you get
recruiters.
60?
Yeah, if you think about that, that's wild. And you said earlier that 90% of the job. is about relationships. Okay, if you're able to get more time back to build better relationships, it's an enormous edge
Couldn't
for
you, Alex,
anybody.
couldn't you see a world where everyone's AI agents are building relationships with other AI agents simultaneously, and all you need to do with them is query, "Oh, I have this need," and they will be able to give you a real time update on who is available to help you fulfill that need?
What's wrong with that?
No, it'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I believe that's what we're working to. And if you live in a world like that, I don't believe in zero sum. I believe that the rising tide lifts all boats, right? I think it's just going to enable so much more opportunity. Because, right, even up until this point, if you're not technical and you have an app idea, you're limited by who you can convince to help you build that app.
Yeah.
Those days are leaving. This article says right here this engineer wants to work with Cursor and his company's making him work with Copilot, right? What does it matter? You should let them bring their own tools in. I understand the IT security, but they're getting more and more robust. Is it really? Like, I'm
Yeah.
literally going in through this process with a strategic partner of a very large aviation company. And because we've got Microsoft single sign on, their IT department's basically like, okay, cool. It's been unbelievable. I'm like, so you don't have to do a whole bunch of security audits of me and have me answer like multi-page documents and no, just send us the walkthrough and some documentation so we know what it looks like. But because we've got
SOC
it's
2.
a Nerva ID or something like whatever Microsoft's new security thing is, we've got that certification. It removes all their hesitation. So now I'm just trying to talk them into giving the aliases to the recruiter so we can send out as the hiring managers instead of him because that will take us from a 60% throughput to a 90% throughput.
So do you think is this like a common thing to message as the hiring manager, or is this like a hack for you?
It's been a hack for me for the last 5 years. People were
Yeah.
super resistant to it in the last 5 years. Within the last 2 years, every executive was like, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I would imagine.
It's a war for talent.
Well, that's exactly it. There will be studies, if not had started already, about what has happened in talent in the last 5 years since COVID, in terms of the extraordinary overhiring and the extraordinary layoffs that are called like performance layoffs. Also, which could be its own episode, calling layoffs performance
Don't
layoffs.
get
And
me started on that.
the,
Got another 24 minutes here, and we got a lot of things we could talk about. But if
uh,
I start talking about that, it'll be an hour. Yeah,
stunning cognitive dissonance by everybody. It's like, what planet are we living on?
I
No,
guess
but
just the TLDR on that is that those companies, Meta, who are hiring people, keeping them from 8 to 16 months, and then laying them off over and over and over again, that will come back to haunt you one day.
I don't know how it can engender a real positive culture.
Do you
Like,
feel do you feel happy when someone announces they got a job on Meta on LinkedIn, or do you feel a little bit of pity for them? I do.
I'm sure the wedge is fine.
That's my spicy take, right? You got a job at Meta? I'm sorry. Try to push
Yeah,
through it and see if something else comes along, like a startup that values you and will give you
I
psychological
mean, I
safety.
would stress that startups are equally as egregious in this regard. You know what I mean? I think there's like a cultural shift now,
Well,
in a
good.
way.
It's coming if it's not here.
Yeah, like
Gen Z's not good. Gen Z's not dealing with this.
totally.
Things are changing, right? Like things are changing quite a bit. Gen
I
Z,
don't know.
like I wrote some articles about this on Substack, right? It's not ping pong tables and food and trips. It's psychological safety and career frameworks and development
Yeah.
and the ability to fail, the ability to make a mistake as long as you learn from it. Now, if you make the same mistake 3 times in a row, we got to have a talk, bro. But if you make a mistake, my co-founder has failed in so many projects.
I'm sure he'd
And I'm
love you
like,
saying
well,
that.
what did you learn from it? Like, what did you learn? How can this make us better? Right?
It's interesting you say this because I remember I'd never even heard of the word RIF or the
Reduction in
acronym
force.
RIF, reduction in force, until March 2020. And what astounds me now looking back at it, okay, is I remember so vividly speaking to our head of talent, and this was at a tech company in San Francisco. And they was about maybe 180 people, maybe or something, and they could not get rid of people. So they basically used the RIF to force the attrition, so to speak, because they couldn't, people wouldn't leave. But there wasn't a culture of firing people, and there wasn't a culture like that. I feel in San Francisco at all back in the pre-COVID days. I don't remember, except for companies when they literally went bust, that there were these kind of layoffs
It's
or
been
people.
yeah, it's been a perfect storm. It started with COVID.
Yeah,
We hired too much during the pandemic, and now we're coming into an austere economic time, and we need to cut, cut, cut. And then that just segued right into AI. And they're like, well, we're
yeah.
already cutting. Let's augment everybody with AI, and let's just cut, cut, cut until people are screaming that they need help. And
Do you
then
think it
we'll start hiring again.
Do you think it's because we've become remote, so it's become almost like remorseless? You don't have
Yeah.
a quote unquote physical relationship with somebody. You have a virtual relationship with somebody as a colleague, I should say rather. And doing this in person is not the same as doing it over Zoom or
Yeah.
sending an email. You know what I mean? I'm not sure you even did you listen to the New York Times daily podcast today? And
I
they
did
had
not.
it's all about the government layoffs. And they
Mm.
had all these different people on about I received an email at 7:05 PM and it was about my performance. And it's the cynicism, like how cynical firing has gotten now. Suck it up.
There's gonna be a rebound from it as soon as the economy comes back.
But is the economy here?
I think it's slowly coming back. It's better this year than it was last year.
Yeah, I was reading, and I would have to honestly double check my source on this, but in since I saw something on Twitter that it's Series A kind of investment is not happening. So there's so many zombie Series B, C companies that were all funded in 2020, 2021 that basically can't grow anymore, and then they're kind of on life support now. So that's a lot of startups. That's
Well,
a lot
there's
of
gonna be some
companies as
market
well.
adjustments. If you're not
Yeah.
following Sam Lesson from Slow Ventures, I definitely recommend you sign up for his newsletter. He sends out a weekly one. He's been saying it forever. AI is wrecking VC. They built a factory system where everybody was making money all the way through it. And now AI is just going to wreck it. AI is going to wreck all these SaaS companies that have been raising money for the last 10 years.
Well, I think,
It's a race to the bottom now. You've got to differentiate, right?
yeah,
And if you're
you
essentially,
just
if you're a feature and not a platform, you better figure out how you become a platform.
yeah, at the end of the day, all of this chat reminds me of the AI sort of obsession this past 2 years or whatever. Reminds me of when apps were a thing. There was a time when the iPhone ad was literally them showing a race car app to show that the phone could move left to right. How basic is that?
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? In the sense that now, obviously, the ads are ludicrous, but in the sense that like apps were a thing then, there's an app for that was the line, and it was like, oh, HSBC, you guys don't have an app, you guys are dead. You know what I mean? It's like, whatever, man. I think it'll be the same with something AI. Of course, we're seeing an extraordinary amount of venture capital being pumped into AI. And that does look scary in one sense and also kind of cool on the other. But all this stuff like even out. I did.
AI, is it a wrapper around a large
Yeah, I
organization?
think we'll find out what there'll be a wash, obviously. It's not like let's unleash Skynet here. And I think that's the important thing for recruiters as well. It's not going to take their job. You know what I mean?
It'll
The
take some
human,
jobs. It'll take some jobs.
yeah, but they
But
will
it
like
maybe
if
recruiting will become a little bit more exclusive function
well, that's
instead of this low barrier to entry profession that it started out as. Being a recruiter will be something that you really like. You earn a job within entering a marketing organization, or you earn a
well,
job coming into a sales organization through your sales.
I think you're being too hard on recruiting.
Uh,
I think recruiting is like sales. It rewards people who are really good at it. You know what I mean? You're comped that way.
you're not unless if you work for an agency, you are. But if you work internally, you're not comped on
Yeah,
your ability.
in the sense that I think like recruiting has a great low barrier to entry. And I think that's awesome that anybody can be a bit of a misfit, not really find themselves and find a career in
Sure.
recruiting. And I think AI is not going to wipe that away. It's not going to wipe away your God given gift or your graft or your hard work. What it's going to is just get rid of all the mundane bullshit that like
Yeah.
basically people have to deal with. And you can continue doing that or you can get an edge today because it's not going to replace the way you have a relationship with somebody. You talked about AI agents earlier and how exciting that is. If I had a relationship with you, Michael, in a recruiter or client sort of perspective, okay? If we had agents talking to each other and ironing out when is the right time for us to communicate, Yeah, as in being able to schedule, make it happen for us to come in at the right time to have the right conversation. What is wrong with that? That, if anything, that's the most efficient thing ever. And I think recruiters, when you think about all the random shit you have to put up with, ATS is not integrating with things, or there's so many low hanging fruit here
Undeveloped
for,
processes.
oh my God, you could have such an edge. I keep using the phrase edge because there's no edge left in marketing. There's literally none. If you wanted to do growth marketing now, it's all on LinkedIn. You can just literally watch videos and you'll get it. There's so much content created. And you don't have to be in the top 0.1%. You just have to be in the top 1%. There's a lot of room up there. And I think in recruiting, that hasn't happened in recruiting yet. So there's just so much opportunity to be in the top
Which goes
1%.
back to your point that recruiters are only seeing a 20%.
There's so much more time that they
But
can make back.
there's so much more time, and going back to what we said last week, if we have 10,000 more thousand-person companies as opposed to 1,000 more 100,000-person companies, right?
It was my favorite thing you said last week. By far my favorite thing. I was
Yeah,
like,
I think that
inside.
everybody who's afraid of AI or thinking, "How is AI gonna negatively affect me as a recruiter?" I would welcome you to step into my life. The last 2 years have been hard, but not as hard as it would have been if I was full-time someplace or a contractor. It's offered me so much more stability being able to service multiple companies simultaneously. And
Yeah.
I think a lot more senior people should consider going fractional. Same thing with lawyers, right? Like, are lawyers going to go away? No. Will lawyers have to do less of the annoying crap and more actually helping people? Yeah. Right?
Yeah, but they're getting disrupted as well.
I don't know if I would take advice from an AI over taking advice from a lawyer who's talking to an AI.
I would agree with that, but I think this smuggling AI conversation is fascinating because are you telling me there aren't junior lawyers trying to figure out their billable hours and they're using an AI tool to help them understand briefs or understand whatever the hell documents that they're looking at? I
Yeah.
have no doubt across the board that.
Law firms might be a little bit more stringent on that
Do you
because
think
the
so?
law, yeah, I think law
Really?
firms are probably the one area where there's not a lot of unauthorized access LLMs. I
We'll
think
have to do an
probably,
entire episode on lawyers for this
yeah, it'd be interesting to
episode.
have a lawyer come here and tell us. So AI is being disruptive, but it's also enabling, I think is really the point. And I think that companies really need to start thinking
That
about,
is the point.
companies really need to start thinking about, do we need to pay for all this software or should we just open up our security and just make sure that everybody's using tools that have got industry standard SSO and authentication. And then maybe we use Okta or something. So if you want to use that tool, you better contact them and tell them to get Okta certified or something like that.
I get that. I get people asking me for SOC 2 compliance like every bloody day.
And large
And
enterprise will ask you for SOC 2.
yeah, large enterprise always asks for that. But I do think that's a good practice, by the way. I don't think there should be this sort of cloak and dagger. I'm using this and this is me squirreled away in my corner. I think this could have benefit. Can I just get sign off on this tool? I look at, say, Ellie's price point, which is on the website if you go to Ellie.ai,
Yeah.
and I go criminally
Which is a decent price point.
yeah, it's criminally underpriced versus some of the competitors. But this goes back to talent teams not getting doing more with less,
Yeah.
that even that price point is considered a lot.
Any price point for talent teams is considered a lot.
There you go. I think that's part of the balancing question about AI, which is we already have the vast majority of our budget going on some crazy HRIS software. Okay.
It was the biggest change I noticed between Illinois and California. In Illinois, I was never given any budget. I was never given access to any tools. I had to do everything manually. And when I came out to California, people were much more open to me using software. And
Yeah.
I started to be able to use different software and experiment, and it made me more and more efficient, which is why I'm just firmly convinced that more open source software, people having different systems that they use across their career, people having their own stores of data that can authenticate and integrate with enterprise systems that are developed to authenticate and integrate with it. I believe that's the future. I think that's 10, 15 years from now. But that's where we're going to. CFOs will love it. They won't need to have 1,000 different SaaS systems. They'll have one dominant SaaS system that all the individual users out there are working with.
I would agree with that. I also think that like micro SaaS will probably be for a lot of
That
companies.
dominant system will work with all the different micro
Yeah,
SaaS and all
I
okay.
1,000%. I think there'll be like some type of strategic hub slash brain That
Yeah.
is where, and that could be a database. That could be kind of anything. It could be an ATS in this conversation, or it can be like an actual.
It's your CRM, it's how you're bringing information in,
Yeah,
it's the AI agent that's going through all of your information, it's the insights that you're able to generate, right? If you're better
yeah.
with technology, you're better at finding software, you're better using that software, you get better results. In the past, you may have been ignored because you didn't play the political game, but in the future, it will be impossible to ignore that person. Like
I think
that's
so.
the world that I'm working towards. I want to find those people who I want to enable and support those people who don't like office politics and who just want to perform at the best of their ability and be rewarded for it. That's what work should be.
I agree with that. I think honestly, knowing how to use AI for your benefit will give people an edge. What is happening now? And that's what I'm saying. So if you are running your own recruitment firm, for example, it's okay, take a step back and go, I don't want to slap on AI, but if I want to look at my what my process is from sales to say new business development, finding new clients, all the way to running that hiring process. If I take a step back and think of that as one long chain of information, where are the areas that are the links and
Yeah.
where are the areas that I think are broken? You know,
And how can you fully automate it? Like I've
and
already
I automating through that
I've had
pipeline.
a conversation with my co-founder. He's working on automating our sales right now, and next up will be social media.
That's the thing that I think people need to think about is there's an efficiency to this game. And
Yeah,
if I could get a day back for anybody sitting here, okay, I have a podcast called The Labor Pool. And my former podcast was called Fast Casual, which was talking to people in hospitality, talent acquisition. When I started that pod, I didn't know anything about AI tools. I didn't even know how to use video editing tools. And let me tell you, the amount of time that was spent on Googling and watching YouTube videos to figure out how to do something versus now I could just ask ChatGPT straight away, what should I do with this? Secondly, there are so many software tools online that if you want to turn like square video into a horizontal, it will just use AI to do that. And you're like,
yeah.
thank you, AI.
Well,
Whereas before, that was
my
so
partner
hard
just
to do.
told me about a tip. You can use Gemini now, and you can send it a link to a YouTube video and ask it to summarize it for you. So
Yeah, is that
you don't even have to watch YouTube videos anymore.
is that called a Google Light Studio? What do they call that again? Not
No, it's just
Gemini.
in Google Gemini with something. It's Gemini with
Yeah, because there was a thing I saw lately.
Gemini.
Yeah, what is the name of it? I actually can't for the life of me remember because I know there's a bunch of kids out here playing with that. But I think like ultimately we've had a good conversation here about AI and in talent, and I
Yeah,
think like
2.0 flash thinking experimental with apps. Reasoning
oh,
across YouTube, Maps, and search.
yeah, it's a shame they just don't advertise that stuff. I have a bone to pick with those guys. I think honestly, like what the key takeaway here is anybody can get started.
Never
You
been a
can
better time.
never been a better time. Like you can quote unquote smuggle the AI into your workplace. The tools are there. Identify the areas that you're actually, oh my God, this is such anything that you say is a pain in the ass. That's a good place to start. And be like, there's probably an AI tool for that to literally help you. And there's probably an AI tool specifically built for a recruiter, not just as a sort of holistic kind of tool. There might just be specific ones for recruiters. And if paying 20, 40 bucks a month isn't value, if you're getting a day back to do what Mike says is like the most important thing, which is building and nurturing your relationships with people, then I don't know what to say to recruiters. Do you know what I mean? Because if you can get a day back a week to spend more time communicating with them and building relationship, my God, that's such a value add for 20 bucks a
Yeah.
month or 40 bucks a
The,
month,
the unlock,
whatever.
going back to that LinkedIn report, just to summarize and wrapped up, they said that skill-based hiring is gaining momentum. 93% of TA pros emphasize that importance. AI tools enable better quality of hire measurement. 61% believe in this capability. We're on the verge of a whole new world where there'll be a lot more businesses and there'll be a lot more longevity. This period we've all grown up with where you only work at a company for 1 to 3 years, that may be an anachronism. We may get back to people working for companies for 20 or 30 years again, but it will be with the right company that fits their cultural values, their interests, their passion, and with people that they can feel aligned and passionate with. And it'll just transform everything. People will be happier with work.
If there's not a better way to end an episode than that, I don't know what it
Yeah,
is, but isn't that what you want? Just people who
that's the
feel
goal. So don't be afraid of AI.
don't be
Embrace
afraid.
AI. learn from AI, and join us
It'll
back
augment
here
you.
again next Tuesday, not Wednesday. We'll be here next Tuesday for our regularly scheduled time. Alex, always a wonderful time to talk.
Uh,
Thank you all for joining Talent Grind Live, and have a great day. Thanks, Alex.
you're a legend. Bye.
Bye.